Hi, biology. This is our first video of Unit 3. You guys can call this, you can give yourself a big title. Hopefully you already have your table of contents in there. And this whole unit is going to be DNA. This one's going to be Video 1, Discovery of DNA. We will have talked about this in class a little bit before this, so if you were absent, you're going to want to make sure that you read that article called A Photo Finish. So all I'm kind of doing right here is just trying to summarize some of the information that we talked about in the photo finish, specifically about Watson, Crick, and Franklin. After this, we will talk about the actual structure that they discovered. Okay, we already did this for a warm-up in class. Again, if you were gone, you're going to want to read through this. This is just an introduction to sort of how DNA works. DNA only has 4 letters, but you can combine it to make millions of different combinations, and then those combinations are the things that give us all of our different traits. So if you were in class, you don't need to look at this or write anything, but if you weren't in class, you're going to want to make sure you kind of read through it and think about that word cats and how that might relate to the 4 different bases in DNA. All right, so starting right here, you guys can write who discovered the structure of DNA, and then you can write all this down. The actual scientists who were working on it were James Watson and Francis Crick. Okay, Watson from the US and Crick was an Englishman. One was a physicist and one was a biologist. And we already knew from previous experiments, we may get to talking about them like Hershey Chase. We already knew that there was some type of genetic material inside the cell. And we also knew that it was in the nucleus. We knew that traits were passed down from parents to offspring, but we didn't know exactly how it was structured. And being able to find out that structure and find out how to read it would really give us a better idea about what makes up all the different traits in all living things. So Watson and Crick were working on figuring that out. And you guys can see them here in this black and white picture with one of their models that they created. Now, at first, they had a model where the bases were pointing out. And in the next unit where we talk about structure, you guys will see the bases are pointing in. It looks like a ladder that's twisted together. That's your DNA double helix. So Watson and Crick originally had thought that the bases pointed out. And then at one point in time, they worked with another scientist that thought that there were 3 sides to it with all the bases pointing out. But they knew that it wouldn't stay together. They knew that there was nothing holding it together in the middle. So in comes Rosalind Franklin. And Rosalind Franklin was a scientist who hopefully you guys have already gone through the photo finish article and marked the text. Rosalind Franklin was another scientist working in the same lab as Watson and Crick, not necessarily working with them. And she took what we would call the first picture of DNA. So she used X-ray technology to look at DNA from the top down. And you guys can see right here, this X, that is sort of our double helix wrapped around itself. So if you look at your double helix from the top down, and I'll have done this in class as well, and if you looked at it all wrapped around, you looked at it from the top, it actually looks like an X, okay? So here's her famous photo 51. And you guys also read in the photo finish that there was quite a bit of controversy around how photo 51 came to be and how photo 51 came to be in Watson and Crick's possession. So Rosalind Franklin, she was the one who, her picture finally led Watson and Crick to realize that the bases don't point out, they point in. Think about a ladder, the rungs, the part that you climb up. If those parts pointed out instead of in, you couldn't climb up the ladder would fall apart. She was the first one to help them figure out that the bases pointed in. And you can actually see each side of the ladder, this X right here. Now, Franklin didn't necessarily get recognition for her discovery. And she ended up actually dying before the Nobel Prize was awarded. And they don't award a Nobel Prize to someone who's already passed away. So Rosalind Franklin died of, I believe, ovarian cancer, which probably was caused by some of the X-ray radiation that she was exposed to from her work. So Rosalind Franklin, first picture, Watson and Crick figured out the outside of the DNA. Franklin helped to figure out that the inside sort of pointed in and that it was more like a twisted ladder than 2 separate things that are pointing out. Okay, so Watson and Crick, once they got a hold of her picture, we're not sure if Franklin actually gave it to them, if they just utilized it, or if her lab assistant gave it to them. But right away, as soon as they saw that picture and started to analyze that, they figured out that the bases point in. We have a twisted ladder, not two that are pointing out. And then right away, they published their work, and they were eventually given the Nobel Prize. If you guys have a second, this one right here is an interview with Crick. Crick, I believe, has now passed away. Watson is still alive. Watson actually sold his Nobel Prize a few years ago. He got $4.1 million for it. And the person who bought it from him gave it back to him. Yeah. So Rosalind Franklin's gone, Crick is gone, but we still have Watson around. So this one is a quick interview with Crick. If you guys get a second, you want to check that out. It's kind of interesting to see his take on how it was discovered. Okay, guys, that is the end of video 1. All right, discovery of DNA.